on the Ask Dr. Gil podcast, I explored the idea of frequency. And today I want to give an introduction to something called vibrational medicine, which is related to frequency. So we're going to talk about that and kind of get a bit overview of it, and then discuss in subsequent podcasts about how this affects our body and our emotional and psychological states. So stay tuned. Hello and welcome to Ask Dr. Gil. I am your host, Dr. Gil Winkelman, and I'm putting together this 3-part podcast series on vibrational medicine. And I think this is a really important aspect of health and healing. And it's interesting. Part of my thinking in terms of going this route is just the number of people I'm getting these days who are not responding to all of the things that not just I've done, but other practitioners I know have done, and that used to work or worked somewhat. And it's sort of an interesting thing that's happening. And I'm not completely sure why. I have my suspicions, but I think that exploring this from a vibrational standpoint, I think can be really helpful. And I've also had success with this with patients in various ways over the years, and I'm starting to do this more. And I think it's an important aspect of medicine that we don't really talk about. And my goal is to integrate sort of some of the science with some of the somatics and the psychology and some of the spirituality as well. If you've read anyone like Carolyn Mace or Norm Sheehy or Larry Dossey, you know kind of what I'm talking about, because they talk a lot about these issues in their work. And it's interesting because this isn't magical thinking. This isn't blaming people for why they're sick. It's understanding that there are aspects of our lives that we ignore that we need to look at more. And modern medicine doesn't do that, right? Modern medicine barely looks at diet. And if you've listened to my show, you've heard me talk about issues with diabetes as an example. Diabetes can be managed without medication if you eat a clean diet, and clean by low sugar, whole foods, not packaged foods, things that you actually cook. And I've seen people's diabetes reverse in less than 6 months by doing this. I have recently I have a patient who wouldn't do this detox that I had talked about for a long time. And finally she did it, and her A1C went from about 13.5 down to 7 in 4.5 months. And I think at this point, it is in below 7, and she's doing really well and starting to lose weight and, starting to feel better. I mean, she's not 100%, don't get me wrong, but she's doing way better than she was. And that was all through dietary changes. So there's nothing magical about that. And I would say that our energy body, our vibrational frequency, our emotional states, those play a role in this. And if you don't pay attention to that and you don't clear it out, it's going to show up in the physical. And it's almost like we're testing this as a society. We're trying to figure out, how far can we push things before we realize that these are real? These states are real. So, and that kind of brings me to, what is vibration? And in physics, everything has a vibration. Atoms, cells, organs, the fields around us. There's a state and a frequency that is being emitted from that pattern. And what's actually interesting is that when you look at an atom, there's a placement for the particles of the atom, so the electrons in particular, but those are based on a probability. And I mean, there's a probability that I could disappear right now. I will cease to exist and just go away. And maybe some of you are hoping for that. But it is highly unlikely. But that, according to quantum mechanics, that is possible. What I think is interesting, and I read this in a book recently, that if we have a shared reality, right? And that shared reality is real until it becomes unreal, right? So think back before Columbus, most people thought the world was flat. And if you sailed too far, you'd fall off the edge. And it over enough time with people sailing, people realize, oh, it's not flat. It's round because that's how you get around it. And, but it wasn't until it was done that people realized that was the case. And, as a similar example, I was thinking about this in terms of the Wright brothers when they flew that plane for the first time. Like how amazing would it have been to be there and see that? And like with your own eyes, see something that had never been done before and defied the laws of physics as we understood them at that time. And I think that vibrational medicine is part of that, right? It's like at some point, we're going to use some kind of device that emits some kind of frequencies that is going to heal people right away. And we'll look back at what we're doing now and think, wow, what a bunch of witch doctors. Because in a sense we are, because we're using tools that are based in Newtonian physics, which is over 400 years old. And so that's the piece why I think it's time for us to start looking at how do we update this? So vibration is one of the ways. And in biology, we know there's different rhythms in the body. I mean, there's brain waves. Those are frequencies. There's heart rhythms. Those are frequencies. Cellular bioelectrical frequencies. Mitochondria communicate with each other through frequencies, not just within a cell, but across cells. Like all of the mitochondria can sync. It's kind of amazing. And we have no idea how that happens. And so these are the things that I think are important to understand. And likewise, in terms of psychology, emotions can sync. Emotional states can sync. People can pick up on other people's emotional states. I was in a yoga class a couple of days ago where the instructor, who happened to be a friend of mine, had just returned from a funeral. And it was heavy on the class. And I mentioned this, to another friend who had taken the class. And she's like, yeah, this was heavy, and it was not to blame the instructor. I mean, but it was kind of his emotional state that was leading to that. And so we can kind of pick up on those. We can sometimes pick up on thoughts. People and beliefs for sure, but people can get into the same wavelength, as it were. I've talked about this as well. And that happens, you can kind of understand each other better. So, all right. So, what is vibrational medicine? Let's talk about this for a second. So it's basically a system of healing that's grounded in the idea that biological systems have energetic frequencies. And this incorporates energy fields, body mappings, resonance. So as an example, acupuncture is a great example of vibrational medicine. And it's really interesting to me because people, when I first went to get acupuncture, there wasn't a lot of science around it. There is now, but there wasn't back then when I first did it. They would say, how can you do that? I'm like, well, people have been doing this for over 5,000 years. And do you really think that they'd continue sticking needles in each other just for the fun of it? Like, if it didn't work, why would you do it? And I happen to be a particularly sensitive person. And what I mean by that is I'm sensitive in that I can feel things and feel the energies in my body. So when I've had acupuncture, uh, they'll put a needle in one place and I'll feel it somewhere else. And I had an acupuncturist say to me, and you're the type of person that they were able to figure this out with, because this is sort of in acupuncture, there's this idea of something called a meridian. And the meridians relate to an organ system, and they run in particular lines in the body, if you will. And sometimes there's crossover, by the way, but that's not important for the purpose of discussion. The important piece is that you can put a needle on the side of the foot and treat someone's kidney. And that's really cool, right? I mean, because it means that you don't need to get inside the organ systems to do that, right? And so because that's the frequency, you're shifting the frequency in one area, and then it's affecting other areas. So homeopathy is another one of those. And I probably should do a whole podcast on homeopathy. And I think I did one on biotherapeutic drainage, which kind of we touched on it. But homeopathy is an energy medicine, if you will. And it's helping shift the vibration of the person as a result of taking the substance. The tricky part about homeopathy is you have to be, as a clinician, you have to be really, really good in terms of figuring out how the person's patterns, symptoms, psychology, whatever it is, fits relative to the remedy. And it's like putting a puzzle together, but it's a really big puzzle because not all the pieces necessarily fit inside the puzzle. So think of it like it's a 2,000 piece puzzle, but you've got 10,000 pieces and you don't know which pieces actually belong to the puzzle you're trying to figure out. So that's what makes homeopathy particularly challenging. But people who are trained in it and are good at it are really good. I mean, so Reiki is another example of this energy medicine, biofield healing. I would say neurofeedback is too. I think lens may be more of a vibrational medicine than anything else. And the work that I've seen with people getting the lens, the low energy neurofeedback, is just amazing, the shifts that people get. And for some of them, they're really, really subtle, particularly at first. Some of them, they're really potent. So it just depends. Meditation and breath work, which I talked about last week as well. I'm going to take a quick break, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about how this matters physiologically. So stay tuned. Hello and welcome back to Ask Dr. Gil. I am your host, Dr. Gil Winkelman. And if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to send me an email to info@askdrgil.com. And today we're talking about vibrational medicine. And I want to sort of finish up this topic to talk a little bit more about why this matters, because I think that we can talk about this from a theoretical point of view, but we don't necessarily understand, why do I care, Dr. Gale? I think it's important because if you think in terms of vibration, you can prevent illness from happening before it happens. You can prevent illness in the body by recognizing the patterning in the frequency field of the body before it hits the physical field. And what's nice about that is it's much easier to treat. So, for example, Carolyn Mace talks about this, that cancer starts with energy patterns. And I think she says in Anatomy of Spirit, she believes it starts with regrets and resentments that aren't dealt with. And then it festers in the energy field before it gets into the physical body. And so when you have emotional states that are unresolved, this creates a vibrational compression. And as a result of that, it will then fester in the physiology eventually. Now, we know there is a connection between stress and the body, right? The whole idea of psychoneuroimmunology comes through that. But without getting into the weeds about that, because I don't think the weeds are particularly important for the average person. I think what's important is understanding that when we have states that we don't resolve within us, that will start to have a cascading effect. Now, how it cascades doesn't matter, right? If you're working on it in the vibrational field first. And and the thing is that if you fix it in the field, then you're not dealing with symptom management. You're actually healing, right? And a lot of what we do is about, I think it was Voltaire who said, the job of a physician is to entertain the patient until the body heals itself. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. It's like, I think that we are expecting something from the doctor to heal, right? But and sometimes that's appropriate, right? I mean, sometimes there are things that I as a physician can do and provide to a patient that will help them heal for whatever reason. A great example is someone with a concussion and using neurofeedback. Sometimes when you have a concussion, your psychological and mental state isn't strong enough to make a decision, an appropriate decision. And so the neurofeedback sort of resets you and you go, oh, yeah, I don't need to keep doing this anymore, whatever this is. Or, the headaches go away and you can actually focus and breathe and meditate. I mean, I've had this experience myself, having a migraine, and I can't meditate. I can't breathe properly because I'm in so much pain, right? And so having something to help is really useful in those situations. But I think if you can get to the place, and I know for myself, if I can figure out what the trigger is for it starting and deal with it then I don't get to that place. And for me, sometimes it's just overdoing it, that's just my personal situation. But I think that when you start to think in terms of vibration, right, then you can start to think in terms of prevention as well. And And so that's kind of like my goal is to put me out of business in a sense. Now, obviously, we're not going to put every doctor out of business. There's still going to be need for physicians. But I think that as people kind of empower themselves and start to see these things, the role that I will play will change. It'll be more of being a sounding board and helping people see things for themselves and acting like a mirror, which is that's actually exciting to me. So along those lines, I go to my website, you'll see, and I'm going to be offering some new courses and some new workshops on some of these topics. And next week, I'm going to talk more about vibrational medicine in the body. So thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this, and I will see you next time.